We are just 2 weeks away from Notre Dame's season opener on the road against Florida State. And after a couple of weeks of fall camp, I think there's a better picture at what the Notre Dame depth chart looks like on both sides of the ball. We're going to dive into a projected depth chart on both sides of the ball. Before we do, make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video, like and subscribe. We appreciate you guys, what we're building here at blueandgold.com. We'll start with the offense and bringing in Tyler Horka to break these guys down. Now, Tyler, big surprises here at quarterback and running back. Just kidding. Figure we got to at least talk about the projected depth chart with the backfield. Jack Cohn, Kyron Williams. First, what have you seen from these guys through a couple weeks of fall camp?
Yeah, I mean, those are two of the most important players on the field for any team. And for Notre Dame, I think the Irish have a couple of really good ones in Jack Cohn and Kyron Williams. I was really impressed with Jack Cohn in this past Thursday practice that the media got to see the entirety of. He just looks really accurate, and Brian Kelly kind of harped on that in his press conference after the practice and said, Jack Cohn's not going to throw the ball into situations where bad outcomes can occur. He's just too much of a veteran quarterback to do that. He's going to protect the football. He's going to make the right decisions. Time will tell to see if that leads to explosive plays, because I know that's what Notre Dame fans are really looking for, being able to push the ball down the field. But then Kyron Williams is a guy who's also going to protect the football. He's a veteran in this stage of his career. Last year, I think everyone was, pleased with his phenomenal sophomore season. And I really think that a lot of people think that, he can do even better this year if the offensive line cooperates, if Jack Cohn's able to, sustain drives and move the ball. So Kyron Williams, one of the best running backs in college football, perhaps. Jack Cohn, maybe not one of the best quarterbacks in college football, but certainly a veteran one that Notre Dame's counting on this year.
And we're just listening to the starters here for this depth chart. Of course, Chris Tyree at the running back position is going to get a lot of playing time, as is, someone like Joe Wilkins at the receiver spot, Lorenzo Styles. But just looking at starters here, Boundary, Kevin Austin, Field, Braden Lindsey with that speed, slot receiver Avery Davis, and of course the tight end Michael Mayer. How confident do you feel that this is your starting receiver group? Could Joe Wilkins, make a move for one of these positions? Like, what do you feel about how locked in these guys are?
No, I think that's the trio right there for sure. And look, you got three seniors right there. It may not feel like they're seniors because of a lack of production up to this point in their career, but if they stay healthy, if they're able to, produce for the first time for a lot of these guys. I know Avery Davis had a pretty good year last year, going over 300 yards, but they think that Avery Davis, a team captain, can do even better than that, this upcoming season. So if those three guys are kind of working in tandem, I think it's really unique in that they all kind of present something different. And that's the way it's supposed to be at three different wide receiver positions, right? But you got Kevin Austin, who's just kind of a freak of nature physically. He's the guy that's supposed to stretch the field and make the catches over the top. Braden Lindsey can make catches over the top with his speed too, can kind of take the top off of defenses. But I've really been impressed with Lindsey catching balls in traffic over the middle of the field in training camp, or in fall camp so far. So I think all of these guys have been pretty impressive. And then, of course, like you said, there's Michael Mayer down there just sitting at the bottom of that list. And we don't even really have to say too much about him. He's a guy that I think they're counting on him to do a lot of different things than he did last year. Last year was just kind of getting his feet wet. And if getting your feet wet as a true freshman means 450 yards and a couple touchdowns, then maybe he gets close to that 1,000-yard mark. Maybe he gets in the end zone 5, 6, 7 times, upward of 10 times maybe. There's just so much upside with this Notre Dame offensive, these offensive skill players. But at the end of the day, they have to get on the field and they have to produce.
We've written extensively about the projected offensive line, starters. I feel like if you would have told me this was the starting five a month ago, I would have been like, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. But the one thing that is a surprise is Zeke being a guard when everyone felt like he is definitely a center. And Patterson being the center, I feel like most people thought it would have been flipped, where you would have had Patterson at left guard and Zeke Krell at center. But I digress. Your thoughts on this offensive line? How have they looked in practices? And I'm guessing this is pretty locked in as the starting five.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Blake Fisher held out of a couple practices because of a concussion, but that was not enough to say, okay, maybe some other guys are going to start stealing reps from him. When he came back from that head injury, he slipped right back in there with the first team, and he looked really good. Of that five in that Thursday practice that we've been talking about, I think Blake Fisher was probably one of the best, if not the best. He can do so many things on so many different plays. You need him to pull out on a screen pass. He's all the way out to the boundary, and you're just sitting there. How did a guy 335 pounds get out there so quickly? But he could really move. He's really athletic. I think he's definitely locked in as the left tackle. But he might hit that freshman wall. Brian Kelly talked about it in the press conference. Who knows if that happens? Zeke Correll, you talked about. Yes, he's a little bit undersized, but Brian Kelly likes that. He's a smart player. He knows how to use leverage to his advantage. I think they're very confident in what he can do at left guard. At right guard, Caden Madden, it looks like he struggled a little bit, making that transition from Marshall. I know he's a preseason All-American, and according to a lot of different outlets, but he still has something to prove over there at right guard, even with all the starts that he brings over from Marshall. So definitely kind of looking at him to kind of take the next step, because Notre Dame needs that. If Josh Lugg can stay healthy, he's going to be a really solid right tackle. And then we all know what Notre Dame has in Jarrett Patterson. And, you talked about Zeke Correll maybe taking that spot from him, but I just thought it was very telling that in the very first day of camp, Brian Kelly came in and he said, no, Jarrett Patterson is our center. That's a permanent thing. That's the way it's going to be. That just speaks volumes to what he knows that they have in Jarrett Patterson, and just kind of the ringleader that he is for this offensive line.
And we'll bring in Patrick Engel to talk about the defensive depth chart. Viper, Isaiah Foskey, defensive tackle, Jason Adamalola, nose tackle, Kurt Heinisch, strong side defensive end, that big end position, Myron Tongavaloa Amosa. So when you look at this group of four here, 3 new starters there. Of course, Kurt Heinisch returning for that extra COVID year of eligibility, a mainstay at nose tackle. So what are kind of your thoughts about this depth chart, the talent, and how likely do you think this group is to start against Florida State?
I think this has been pretty clearly the first team in both the open practices we've seen, and then even in some of the non-scrimmage portions that are still doing drill work, but they're grouped together in specific ways. And it seems like, yes, I think these guys are going to be the starters and designated as such on the official game notes or what have you. But it almost seems kind of not pointless, but put an asterisk next to starter just because of how many guys Notre Dame rotates in the defensive line there, where they have we've seen a lot of different combinations, an entire second unit line change that they do, different looks when they go to nickel. I mean, we've seen in practices 9 to 10 guys really get some work with the first team unit and against the first team offense. So you certainly look at Riley Mills as someone who really impressed on in Thursday's open practice to work in there a lot with Jason Adamalola, Justin Adamalola playing both defensive end spots, Howard Cross, Heinisch's main backup there, has really impressed last year in the spring game and has continued to in fall camp. And then Jordan Botelho playing Viper, playing some off-ball backer. So when we're talking about starters, I think it's important to mention all of those guys that you're going to see in there, and even a couple I probably didn't mention. But yeah, I think this is the group that you're going to see with Foskey and his ceiling, where you even seen him pop up in some early round 2022 NFL draft projections. Heinisch, Tagovailoa, Mosa entering their third years as starters. Those guys are going to play. Of course, Myron moving over from defensive tackle. And then Jason Adamalola, yes, a new starter, but it almost feels like he's a returning starter just because of how much he's played the last 2 years, and really how he ended last season on a really high note against Clemson and Alabama.
Let's move to the linebackers. I mean, this is interesting to me. Obviously, Drew White was the locked in. He was going to be the Mike. But Will Maris, Lufau, Rover, Jack Kaiser. My first question you hear is, Will and Rover, how locked in do you think those guys are as potential starters, a couple weeks out?
Those are the guys that we've seen Lufau and Kaiser take most of the first team reps, but I think you're going to see some guys kind of cycle in there a little bit too. We talk about defensive line versatility and depth. This is another position where Notre Dame feels it has a lot more than just those 3. I think you look at really 5 guys in the rotation at linebacker that Notre Dame really feels it likes. Of course, these 3 plus Shane Simon plus J.D. Bertrand. Or even in open practice, we've seen J.D. Bertrand among those 5 work at will linebacker next to Bo Bauer. Bo Bauer has cross-trained too. So I think, again, these are where it's trending to go as far as starters, but you look at Will and Rover in particular as positions where we'll see someone else mixed in as more than just a backup who occasionally comes in to give a guy a drive off. And same with Mike. You'll see Bo Bauer in there a lot as the nickel middle linebacker and perhaps even at will. They really tried to cross train those guys.
We'll round out with the secondary. I've been saying all off season that if Cam Hart is what we all hope he is, and that gives the Notre Dame defense a big boost, because if Cam Hart wasn't ready, then you probably move Clarence Lewis over to boundary, Tariq Bracy to the field, and that's not a secondary group or a cornerback group I'd feel great about. But here, this quartet, Cam Hart, Clarence Lewis, Kyle Hamilton, Houston Griffith, this looks like a pretty darn good group. What have you seen from these guys, Patrick?
Yeah, I think corner is probably the position that you have the most questions or get a little pause about. They haven't had the best camp, but and a lot of that has to do with what we've seen from Notre Dame's wide receivers and Kevin Austin and Braden Lindsey certainly displaying what you would want to display at this point to think, okay, a breakthrough senior year is in store for both of them. But yeah, I think you like at least the upside and room for growth that both of those corners have with Hart, his ball skills and his length there at that boundary position. And then Lewis, his tackling ability and ability to keep things in front of him, even though his, I think, ball skills are one area where you'd like to see him improve more, and Notre Dame's corners as a whole make more plays on the ball, get more pass breakups and deflections, an area where they haven't ranked particularly high the last couple of years. Of course, Kyle Hamilton doing a lot of that lifting in terms of pass breakups and interceptions since he got here. That's locked in. The only thing is a matter of how does Marcus Freeman use him? Where is he aligned? Is he just mainly playing center field? Is it a 3-level player? I mean, wherever you put him, he's going to make an impact. And then Houston Griffith, seen him take most of the first team snaps at that other safety spot, had a pretty good day in Thursday's open practice. You see impressive physical tools and a willingness to be physical, to come up and run support. And that's where I thought he stood out in particular in Thursday's was playing run defense and coming up there. So I think this is what it's going to look like, but there's still, at least on defense and maybe even on the team overall, the area where you have the most questions of, okay, what can these guys do? What's the talent here overall compared to the teams Notre Dame's trying to chase.
That's going to do it for this video. Make sure you hit the thumbs up if you like what you saw. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content. Make sure you go to blueandgold.com for more coverage as Notre Dame's gearing up for Florida State.